Thank you so much for joining this webinar today. If you have any questions, my colleague Erin is on the line and she can answer anything that you have in Q&A. So feel free to drop it in there if you have any questions about either the content or just about how to use Zoom or anything else at all. We are at the ready to help out, but we're going to go ahead and get started here. And today's presentation, we're really excited. We've got a new analytics center. And we're going to be talking about from analytics to action, how you can mobilize your people management data to build healthier cultures, to build a stronger people practice, to be more effective with your leadership teams and with your companies. So really excited to be chatting about this topic. This is something we've been working towards for a long time at Lattice, something we're excited to keep building on, a foundation for the future as well. So we're just going to jump right into it. So I'm Jack. I'm the CEO here at Lattice. Started the company a little under 4 years ago. And what we do is people management software. We want to help companies align, grow, engage their employees. We offer products like performance management, engagement surveys. Now we're really excited about this new analytics center that we've got. We've helped 1,000 customers, including places like Slack, Reddit, Cruise, New York Public Radio, and many more. And we're really thrilled to partner with our customers. We really see our customers as partners. So we love hearing from you. The more feedback you give us, the better we're able to build our products, the better we're able to serve you all as customers. So please keep sharing feedback. It's the lifeblood of how we grow and how we keep building great things for the world. So what we want to talk about today is how people data changes the way that organizations make decisions. So there's a lot of ways that companies make decisions. There's the inputs that are part of the decision-making process. There are the people, there are the processes, but we're deep believers that people data can really improve the quality of decisions. And so when you think about the ways that you make decisions without data when it comes to people management, you look at things like observations. So what do I perceive in my role, either as an HR leader, as a manager? What are the emotions that I'm sensing from others, that I'm feeling from myself? What are the instincts that I have based on past experiences? Based on my intuition, based on my human experience, and then what are my general beliefs? And so these things aren't wrong. These are just ways to make decisions when you don't have data at your disposal. And these are actually important inputs, but they're only going to be part of the equation. On the other side, when you do have data, how do you make decisions? You'll be looking at things like facts, drawing insights from the numbers, exploring trends and extrapolating out what you might expect for the future based on what you've seen from the past, running experiments and seeing what are the results when you try a new people management practice or when you change results based off of the people engagement survey. And so the quantitative side, the information that you get from measuring is really valuable too. And what we believe is the most powerful, where the magic happens, is when you combine both the qualitative inputs and the quantitative inputs. So this is what we're talking about today. This is actually how we believe that the future of people management looks, where we believe that people operations teams are at their best when they're combining the data that they get from all sorts of inputs around people management, whether it's things like engagement surveys, pulses, or performance reviews, goals, one-on-ones, feedback, all of these different practices. How do we take the data that we glean from those things, mix it with the sort of qualitative inputs that we get from observation and conversation and sort of our instincts and our experiences? That's where we can find something great. At its fundamental level, data is going to help you predict the future. So data is going to allow you to reach into the past to find what happened, not at just an instinctual level, but what are the actual facts on the ground, and allow us to extrapolate out to the future and make more informed decisions. And so more informed decisions might be around things that drive better employee engagement. It might be things that help us drive better employee retention and reduce turnover. It might be things that will help certain teams and certain offices be more productive. But data is a powerful tool. We've now got the technology and the software to make this readily available at our fingertips. And so we want to give you sort of frameworks and the tools to enable these kinds of practices at your companies. So a framework for how we think that you can use data as part of your process to make great strategic people decisions is this. We have 5 parts of this process where we look through observations. We then combine that with insights. based off of data that we've gleaned. We can then make predictions about, based off of what happened, if we do this in the future, what will we see? So this is the sort of if X then Y part of our process. We then want to commit to and start taking action. So what are the things that we're going to be able to do to change the way that our culture impacts our business? What are the things that we can do to change employee retention or to improve engagement? What are the things that we can do to improve performance in different ways? And then finally, we want to follow up. We want to measure, did the things that we tried to do actually have real results? And then we want to start the process all over again. And so this type of flow, we're going to go through an example here, but this is how we believe that people teams can evolve into very high functioning, very strategic parts of the organization. And this is what we want to arm customers with. So to give an example of each of these different stages, an observation is something like a qualitative observation around either a conversation that we had or something we are noticing when we hear from managers talking about their teams. An example here might be, you had coffee with your best engineer last week, and she mentioned that her manager is a micromanager. So this alone is not enough context to do something, but it's a clue. And I think often the best ways for people management teams to do their work is to start with a clue, either from data and then digging more into interviews and conversations with employees, or vice versa, where you start with an observation like a conversation here. This can often be the beginning of, aha, I see something interesting, I want to learn more. So then what? Then we can look at insights. So we can say, okay, engagement surveys show that the engineering team had poor ratings when it came to management. So now I have both a piece of data from a survey that I ran. I also had a conversation that's corroborating this. This is giving me information to learn more. Similarly, I might see an insight that after combining engagement and HRIS data, we see that employees who have bad manager ratings are 63% more likely to quit. We can look at this sort of data either across the industry, in our own zip code, or potentially if we have enough data and time, we might even be able to see at our own company what the more specific numbers are. So there are certainly benchmarks that you can look to at the broader industry level to get a sense of how all of these things are connected when it comes to performance and engagement. But you might also have the data at your own company to see, it actually turns out that in our specific culture, not receiving enough feedback from your manager is a huge predictor of turnover. And so the insights can come at different levels, the observations can come at different levels, but combining these things are going to give you a clear story. So what will this lead us to between that observation and this sort of data that we have? It's going to lead us to a prediction. If we don't fix engineering team management's problem, we're going to experience high attrition rates. Seems straightforward, but we have a clear case here and we know the expense. We know how expensive this is to our company. We know that this is going to mean lack of productivity and more recruiting. And we have real signal telling us, both through conversations and through data, that this is a very real problem. So then we can ask ourselves in the process, moving to action, what can we actually do about it? So we might do things like investing in manager training or sharing resources on how to be a better and more effective manager. We might just want to work with our managers to optimize their current process or to make sure that we have one-on-ones with highly rated managers so that we can take those practices and then share them more broadly with the team. That one in particular is one of the most effective things that companies like Google do, where they observe the top performers. They don't try to change their behavior. They just try to watch, they just try to learn from them and then share those practices across the company. But when you find data combined with observations, you'll have very clear cases for why it's important for you to take action if you want to improve your culture, to improve your sort of strategic efforts in people management. And then you can commit to action plans. You can look at things that you've tried in the past that either worked and do more of those. You can brainstorm new ideas with working groups or with leaders at your company of what are the things that we can do to correct this problem that we're pretty sure exists. But having an action plan based off of data is going to be very powerful, and it's going to be something that you're going to be able to get good leadership buy-in on. And then after you've done that, after you've committed to an action plan and started taking steps, you want to follow up. So you want to then measure and see, did what we did work? When we did institute manager trainings, did it have improvement on engagement scores on those teams? Did it change the way that employees were feeling on a daily basis? When we look at pulse surveys, do we find that sharing best management practices had any impact? Did it not? but we can at least measure these things now. And so what you want to do, at least at the company level, is to communicate the areas where you're working on engagement improvements, performance improvements. What are the things that you're specifically going to work towards? And then say that you're going to measure these things and then actually do that. And I think that loop generates a lot of trust. Trust is built when we say we're going to do something and follow through on it. And it doesn't mean that we have to be perfect. It doesn't mean that each of our insights has to be spot on and that every single correction that we deliver has to be perfect. But showing to the company that we have a commitment to caring, to trying and improving these things will go a long way. And then building that sort of completed loop where we then follow up on what we said we were going to do, where we share the results of whatever efforts we took, that's going to be really important. So this is what we mean when we talk about looking at people management data to drive better business results, is that sort of loop that we just talked through. And so now we want to go through some obviously anonymized, but examples from customers of how you might be able to use analytics to drive insights. So a really simple one, and a lot of us have seen this in sort of different ways throughout our careers, but simply looking at engagement levels across teams. Really basic, but it can show you things like our engineering team is feeling burnt out. So it might be the case that when you look by department, you see drastically different engagement scores, whether it's in sort of level of commitment to the company or team culture or how we feel about management. But just starting with this is really powerful, especially as companies grow. You don't have one uniform culture. You certainly will have facets of, one particular cultural crystal, but it's going to be different depending on what group you're in, who your manager is, all these sorts of things. And so looking at engagement across teams is very valuable. Now, like we were saying, when you look at observations and insights, you definitely want to combine any data that you get with sort of qualitative deeper dives and one-on-one conversations, or vice versa. If you start by getting a clue from those kinds of conversations, then you want to sort of corroborate that with insights. But this is one very surface level, but very impactful way that you can look at data. Another is trying to figure out who are my top performers with the most potential. So most of us have seen the 9-box or similar types of plots, where basically we are looking at things like behavior and performance, potential and performance. We're essentially looking at 2 dimensions, either aligned to things like values, how you actually did against your goals, what your team believes is sort of the growth curve at which you're progressing. And then you can kind of find the people in specific quadrants, and then you can take action based off of those. So you might decide the people who are our top performers with the top potential and maybe the top sort of value alignment with our company, those are the people who we want to be making sure that we're promoting. These are the people we want to be giving more responsibility to, who we're giving raises to, because these are the people who are most driving our business forward. And it might be that people in the middle quadrant are the ones who we want to support. These are the people that we want to make sure that we are giving resources to, that we're developing, but those are sort of the steady state as we go group of our employees that we want to make sure that we're sort of gearing our target practices towards. And then similarly in other groups, so whether it's high potential but not performing in their role, maybe we've got people who are not in the exact right role for them, or maybe they're managers and supporting, and so on and so forth. And so looking at the data in these ways and then combining it with specific conversations will give you a foundation to drive action plans that will have a really big impact on your company. So a slightly more interesting insight when we combine performance and engagement is this sort of thing. So here across the top, you'll see the ability to filter engagement scores by performance. And so it might be the case that underperformers and top performers actually have very different sentiment on the company. And this could go different ways. It's not necessarily the case that higher performers will be more engaged, but in this particular case, we're looking at a situation where underperformers tend not to like their managers. And this, of course, will impact your sense of engagement with the company, how bought into sort of the vision and the mission you are. Managers have a huge impact on our happiness at work. And so in this type of case, we might say, okay, now we've learned a new thing. We've learned that our company is actually specifically geared towards a certain type of performer. And this might be something that we are happy with. It might be something we're unhappy with. But regardless, it's going to give us clues of where to look. So now you might say, okay, I'm going to look at the low performers in our San Francisco office, and I'm going to figure out how to have conversations with leadership in those offices around what things might we be doing differently for top and bottom performers? Are we taking action appropriately? Are we making sure that we're supporting people the right ways? Are we managing people effectively? It's going to give us really interesting insights to get towards conversations that are rooted in data to gear us towards making real improvements. We also might look at data based off of diversity. And so we might look at things like, how are we creating career opportunities for people of all backgrounds? Are we making sure that regardless of gender and race and all sorts of other factors, that we are making sure that people feel like they're fully included, like we are pulling in sort of a diverse candidate pipeline? And if we're not, how do we dig more into that? How do we make sure that we're having the conversations, that we have the structure in place to make our company culture the way that we want it to be? And so data is going to be a really great place to start here as well. And then just one more example is, how do our top performers feel about the company? So, is this a culture where we do make sure that the people who are driving the business forward the most feel impactful, feel valued, feel committed? And if not, that's going to be something that we extremely quickly want to address. So those are some examples of insights. But the other thing that platforms like Lattice or other sort of analytics tools can do for you is just show you general usage. So it might be things like which departments are sharing feedback. So forget what the actual sentiment of that feedback is, but who's actually engaging with this? Is this done differently by different groups? Is it trending differently over time? Are certain managers driving it? What's going on in terms of continuous feedback? Or managers having one-on-ones? You might also want to see, did a manager drop off with their one-on-ones? And if so, can I correlate that back to goal attainment or performance? Can I correlate it back to engagement on those sorts of teams? So you also want to just look at sort of the raw binary, what's being used, in what ways are management practices happening? And that can also drive a lot of insights. So that was a bunch of examples, but to sort of pull it back to how do we set up a people analytics program? What are the things that we should do? So I know that I want to become more strategic. I know that I want to make sure that we are instrumenting our culture in a way that we can have our hands on the dials of what we're doing, what we can learn, so that we can have these kinds of feedback loops. Where do I get started? So the first thing to do is to start with a list of questions. Just like we do with product, we want to start with problems that we want to resolve or find answers to. We don't want to just start doing work without any direction. And so this is something that you can involve your people team in, that you can involve your leadership team in. But what we want to start with is, what are the things that we care the most about? So examples of questions that might be important to us at any given time are, why are top performers leaving? Who are top managers? Which managers need help? How often are employees sharing feedback with each other? Do employees feel like they have a sense of work-life balance? Are we doing enough to tackle D&I challenges? Who at our company is driving the best hiring? Who is driving the worst hiring, et cetera? And then when you've gotten to some sort of clarity on maybe a question set that you're interested in, this is when we can move on to setting up and optimizing our tech stack. So we don't want to start with tooling and then go to results. We want to figure out, what are we trying to learn? What kind of culture are we trying to build? What are the things we care about? And then we can build around that. And so one framework for this is that on the sort of quote unquote back end, we will have tools like system of record, payroll, benefits. Maybe we can get them all in one place, maybe we can't, but we have the infrastructure and the piping that we need to make sure that our employees are getting paid on time, that all of their stuff is in one place, that they're getting benefits, et cetera. And then on the front end, and this is of course more where we spend our time at Lattice thinking, is what's the employee experience from the day that you start to the day that you leave? How are you thinking through performance and engagement, L&D, onboarding, the way that employees communicate about this stuff, et cetera? And so pulling those tools together, once you've got that list of questions, that's going to be really informative for you, because now you're trying to solve particular problems. You're geared towards a particular cultural outcome that you might want. And this is going to be a much more powerful way to build your program. So then you want to, as a third step, start setting up dashboards and reports that will power the insights that you're looking for. So you want to, after you know the questions and you've got the tools in place, this is when you want to start saying, okay, now we're ready to start measuring what matters. Now we're going to start looking at the things we care about, and we're going to be continually measuring. One company that did a really great job of this is Reddit. they have this posted online, but you can see a dashboard that they've shared where you can look across employee engagement and leadership satisfaction, revenue per employee, what's our offer acceptance rate, what's the sentiment on inclusion or attrition, et cetera. And so by simply naming the things that you care about, you will naturally over time optimize what you're measuring. And so picking that list is really important. And once you've done that, you want to sort of track it very frequently and make sure that you've got the data to know how you're doing. And then you want to complete this loop. So we talked about this earlier, but hard to emphasize enough how important sharing the insights, action plans back with your company are. It's going to engender a ton of trust. It's going to make sure people know that all of this work you're asking them to do, all of these conversations you're having with them aren't for nothing, that you are in fact following up, that you're taking action, and that by engaging with you on all of these people management practices, the employees are in return going to get a great place to work, that they are going to have a people team who cares about them. And so this might come from sharing of your engagement surveys at an all hands. This is our COO at Lattice sharing engagement data back with our employees. But having that loop completed is really critical. And so you want to be doing all of these things, but along the way you want to share with your employees what you're doing. Just like we want to internally share product roadmaps, sales progress, how our customers' health is doing, all of that sort of stuff. We want to do the same with our people practices. So we want to inform, hold ourselves accountable, and share progress all the time. So the takeaways here are, number one is when you're making people decisions, you should use multiple inputs. Qualitative, quantitative, find a mix. There's all sorts of tools at your disposal. There's engagement surveys and pulses. There's going to be dashboards you can pull together. You can then combine that with all of the tools that we all know from our experience work, like one-on-one conversations, working groups. We want to make sure that we have got good relationships with managers so that they can share insights or flags as they come up. Combining those is going to help us get a foundation for the people decisions that we want to drive. Second is using data specifically to help you see the future and take action. And so when we think about observations and insights leading to predictions, then taking actions and following up, we want to remember that the reason that we're collecting this data is so that we can take actions to try to improve the future. And so we want to be clear in that framing to ourselves, to the company, to the leadership team. That way, when we are using data, we know why we're doing it. We've measured something, we're taking action that we believe is going to improve it, and then we're going to share what the results are after we've taken those actions. And then the final takeaway is that when you want to set up a people analytics program, here are the steps that we recommend. Starting with a list of questions that you generate with buy-in from the leadership team and management and all of the employees across your company. Second is, once you have that list of things that you want to work on, then you can sort of start to build your HR tech stack to make sure that you've got the right tools in place, that you have the back end of the employee experience, the front end of the employee experience, kind of where you want situated away so that you can start instrumenting and measuring. Third is going to be building dashboards, making sure that you're getting the reports and the insights that you need to make these decisions. And then finally is informing, sharing insights, committing to and holding yourself accountable to development action plans. And that loop is going to be so effective. It's going to generate trust with your employees. And we hope that Lattice is going to now be a tool that can help you do this. And so over the next week or two, we'll be rolling out a ton of new updates to our analytics products, to the way that you can slice your data, to the way that you can connect performance and engagement data. So really looking forward to your feedback as you start to dig into the product. So that's all we've got for today. So thanks a ton for taking the time with us. If you do have any questions, I'm Jack at Lattice. We love talking. I know we mentioned this at the beginning and end of every webinar, but your feedback is what drives us. It's what allows us to keep building a tool that is useful. And so please keep sharing. Really love your thoughts specifically around this sort of new analytics product that we have. And we will follow up with information from today's webinar. And thanks again so much for joining.